Hi, thank you for purchasing my e-course, and let's start with getting to know more about resin first, and then we will talk more about the art and its setup. So resin is basically a chemical which has been been used in the industry for the past more than 30 years, and recently resin has become a part of art and craft, and people in Europe started this trend. They started using resin to make out paintings, working on the pigments, and slowly in India, I think in 2019 February, we started seeing the trend happening over here also. And the trend started happening because of the workshops that people started taking, and it's quite intriguing to work with resin, right? So resin is basically a chemical, so you need to be really sure and know how to do, what to do, and when to do with resin, because it's a chemical and it can be really injurious to your health too. So in resin, as I told you, that we have different kinds of resins. We work with epoxy resin. In epoxy resin, I particularly have divided it in two categories: an industrial resin and craft resin. Craft resin is basically what I feel is comfortable for me to work in my studio and for my students to work in their own homes without creating any sort of ventilation issues or issues to their health or their family people or to the surroundings that they are doing their artwork in. So in craft resin, we have a lot of brands upcoming now, and I guess the first brand that came up with the craft resin was Epoch. So we are going to use their pigments today, but the resin that we are using are Brewster's Creative Hands material. It's a Calcutta based company, and we are going to use their resin for pouring your own beach pour. Every resin works with different kind of temperature setting, environmental setting, and different kind of pigment ratios, different kind of pigments, and also every resin have their own ratio to work with. So when we are working with different resins, if you're trying some other resin, make sure that you involve and you read out the company's instructions very carefully, that which portion has to be mixed in which ratio. That has to be the prime thing that you have to learn, that the resin should be mixed in the ratio that the company has advised you to. And make sure if you're working indoors, it has to be an epoxy resin, which is a craft resin, not an industrial one. Now, how do you distinguish between a craft resin and an industrial resin? That's a very simple technique that nobody will tell you in the market. So I wish somebody would have told me. I would not have gone through 6 months of not doing anything with resin. I really had some breathing issues. I used to, faint out. I used to feel very pukish and nauseous all the time. So I wish somebody would have told me this when I started my resin art work. So basically, when you talk about resin, it comes into two ratios. That is resin, that is the part A, and P is the hardener, right? So when you mix these two, you have your clear resin. It's called the clear resin when you mix these two in the provided ratio of the company. So now, how do you distinguish whether you have the industrial resin or whether do you have a resin which you can work provided you're working at your home or a place which is not that suitable for ventilation, right? So you need to really understand the company that you're buying your product from. The hardener, that is the main ingredient when you are talking about an industrial resin and differentiating between an industrial resin and a craft resin. The hardener needs to be clear. If it is even slight yellow, you need to dump that off. You do not need to work with that slight yellow resin, because a hardener being the main binding agent, it can be really toxic and it does create a lot of fumes. It can hamper your health very badly. So make sure that whatever resin you're taking, it needs to be clear. Also, it should be non-smelly. It should not be really smelly, because you will end up taking the fumes inside you when you're working with your workpiece, and it can really ruin your work, and it can really ruin your health and people living around you. Now, with the temperature, every resin comes with a different temperature setting. Generally all the resins that we have in India are approximately from 25 to 30 degrees Celsius, right? So if you live in a cold area, if you're living in Shimla, right? So you need to prepare your studio with good heating insulators, so that the artwork, while it's curing, has a good heat temperature, to the resin, because resin only cures with the temperature provided on the bottle. If you are living in a very hot area like Rajasthan and it gets like more than 34 degrees Celsius, so you need to bring down the temperature of your room by using air conditioners or coolers, so that the workpiece does get cured. So now for preparing your own setup at home, so you require your own table, you require a plastic sheet, because plastic is the only thing resin will not stick to, else everywhere it sticks and it will not come off, right? So you will need a plastic sheet before preparing. If you don't have a good plastic sheet with you, I am not talking about a cellophane paper, right? I am talking about a good plastic sheet you will get at a painter store or a construction site. So it needs to be quite thick, and also if you do not have the plastic, you can work with at least 10 to 15 layers of newspapers, so that anything that drips on your surface does not come off. Or if you have a plastic table, then you're good to go, right? But it can get messy because, you know, it's a fluid, it will flow and things will get messy all around. Then you require your resin, you require your pigments, you require your canvas, you require your plastics to work with, you require your gloves. We have gesso, we have a hand sanitizer, it's covered because it gets very sticky. You require nitrile powder free gloves, because you don't require powdered gloves because the powder will spill on your painting and you do not want that. We will require a measuring scale, a few tissues, you require a few tissues, and if you have a heat gun, this is like a gun that is used for trousseau packing. If you have a heat gun, go with a heat gun. If you have a hair dryer, go with a hair dryer for the first time only. And if you have a blowtorch, then you can use that also, but I'll tell you about the blowtorch later. You require a painter's masking tape. This is called a masking tape. You can get it at any good craft store or at a painter's shop. This is approximately like 35 rupees or 35 rupees for a bundle, I guess, or something like that. It's quite cheap. So before starting, everything needs to be covered in plastic. Then make sure that your hair are tied up, because if your hair is not tied up and anything that gets on your hair, you need to get that hair cut. You cannot do anything with that hair because it's a chemical, right? So your hair needs to be tied up properly. So you can wear any of the apron you have, any old t-shirt that you have, or you can buy some plastic disposable aprons from Amazon. I will link it in the email, which will provide you all the material details, right? So as you can see, this is already tampered with my experiments. So as you see, I have tied my hair in the apron because I don't want it to fall on my canvas and destroy my work. I'm just going to take off all the accessories I'm wearing so that it doesn't create any fuss. So now in your kit, you will be provided with a canvas which will be already primed. You will be provided with 4 pigments, that is a sandstone, aquamarine, ultramarine and a white. We have gifted you a coaster, and you would be provided with a few shells to work on your beach. You will be provided with gloves, a straw, that's a technique tool, there's a tool technique, and then you have a spoon to mix your resin, popsicles to mix the pigments, and you have variety of different size of glass. The bigger one is for mixing the resin, and these are for your pigments. Now, in addition to what has been provided to you in the kit, what else you require is a hand sanitizer, anything with a good alcohol consistency. This is a Himalayan hand sanitizer, and you can find it at any chemist or you can order on Amazon. All of my material, I don't like to go and shop, so all of my material that I purchase is generally through any online store, so it will be really accessible to you if you're not in an area which has a good mall or shopping. It's okay, you can just easily buy these things online, and things can come at your doorstep. Then you require a measuring scale. This is a grams and O's, and we are going to work in weight, so I am going to use its grams. This is also from Amazon. Then we have a tissue box, it's just the normal tissues. So that is all you need to do to have your setup. So you require the heat gun too. So apart from this area, everything else is something that you'll have to manage on your own, because I can't provide you this much in the amount that you pay because yet again, these are the tools that you will be requiring only if you are taking it full time, and otherwise you can just manage up you can manage up something instead of these things to just work out your first beach pour, right? So now we are going to talk about canvases.